There's a belief that almost everyone holds at some point. If I just earned a little more, everything would feel easier. It sounds reasonable, it feels logical, and for a long time, it actually worked that way. A higher income meant more breathing room, more flexibility, more control, less stress. But in 2026, that connection doesn't feel as strong as it used to, because a raise doesn't always fix your money stress, and for a lot of people, it doesn't fix it at all. That's what makes this so frustrating. You work harder, you improve your skills, you move forward in your career, and eventually your income increases. On paper, that should solve things, but then something unexpected happens. You still feel tight, you still feel behind, and you're not exactly sure why. Part of the reason is that income and stress don't move in opposite directions the way we expect them to. We assume that when one goes up, the other should go down, but in reality, they often move together. As income increases, so do expectations, and those expectations quietly reshape your financial life. It usually doesn't happen in one big decision. It happens in small adjustments. You upgrade your living situation. You spend a little more on convenience. You allow yourself things that felt out of reach before. None of it feels excessive. None of it feels irresponsible. It just feels like progress. But over time, those small changes create a new baseline. And once that baseline is set, it becomes your new normal. So the extra money from your raise doesn't feel like extra anymore. It feels like it's already assigned, already committed, already part of your life. That's where the disconnect begins, because the raise increased your income, but it also increased your obligations. And when both rise together, the feeling of relief never fully arrives. Another reason a raise doesn't fix money stress is because it doesn't automatically change your financial structure. It doesn't reorganize your spending. It doesn't reduce your fixed costs. It doesn't create a system for how your money should be used. It simply adds more to the top line. And if the structure underneath stays the same, the outcome often stays the same too. This is where a lot of people get stuck, because they're focusing on earning more, while the real issue is how their money is flowing. If most of your income is already being absorbed by fixed expenses, rising costs, or unplanned spending, then increasing that income doesn't create as much freedom as expected. It just increases the size of the system that's already under pressure. There's also the psychological side of money that plays a big role here. When you get a raise, it changes how you think about what you can afford. Your internal limits shift. Things that once felt expensive now feel reasonable, so your spending adjusts accordingly. Not in a dramatic way, but in a gradual one. And because it's gradual, it often goes unnoticed, until you realize that your higher income hasn't created the stability you expected. It's just created a slightly more expensive version of your previous situation. Another important factor is that many of the costs people are dealing with today aren't easily controlled. Housing, insurance, healthcare, transportation, these aren't flexible categories. They tend to increase over time, and once they're part of your budget, they're difficult to reduce quickly. So even if your income increases, those costs continue to rise alongside it, sometimes faster. Which means your raise isn't just adding to your income, it's helping you keep up with your expenses. And keeping up doesn't feel like getting ahead, it just feels like staying in place. There's also the issue of how money stress actually works. It's not just about how much you earn, it's about how secure you feel. And that feeling comes from things like consistency, predictability, and having a margin for error. A raise can increase your income, but it doesn't automatically increase your margin. And without margin, stress doesn't disappear, because you still feel like one unexpected expense could disrupt everything. You still feel like your system is tight. You still feel like you don't have enough room. That's why some of the most common regrets people report aren't about earning too little. They're about how they used what they earned. Impulsive spending, overspending on non-essentials, not having a clear plan. Not because people are careless, but because without a structure, more money simply creates more opportunities to spend, and spending is easier than planning. It's immediate, it feels rewarding, and it doesn't require long-term thinking in the moment. So, when income increases without a clear system in place, it often leads to the same patterns, just at a higher level. That's why the stress remains, sometimes even increases, because now you're managing a larger financial life without necessarily having more control over it. Another layer to this is expectation. When you get a raise, you expect things to feel different. You expect relief. You expect progress. You expect a sense of stability. So when those feelings don't show up, it creates a gap between what you expected and what you're experiencing. And that gap can feel discouraging because it makes you question whether you're doing something wrong. But often, it's not about doing something wrong, it's about understanding what a raise can and cannot do. A raise can increase your income, it can create opportunities, it can give you options, but it doesn't automatically create discipline. It doesn't automatically build structure, and it doesn't automatically reduce stress. Those things come from how your money is managed, not just how much of it you have. So if a raise doesn't fix money stress, what actually does? It starts with awareness, understanding where your money is going, understanding which expenses are fixed and which are flexible, understanding how your spending patterns shift as your income changes. Because once you see the structure clearly, you can start to adjust it. It also involved creating margin, not just increasing income, but making sure that some of that income remains uncommitted, available, flexible, ready to absorb pressure when it shows up. Because margin is what turns income into stability. Without it, even a high income can feel tight. And finally, it requires aligning expectations with reality, recognizing that a raise is not a solution, it's a tool. And like any tool, its impact depends on how it's used. In 2026, that distinction matters more than ever because the financial environment is more complex, costs are higher, uncertainty is greater, and the gap between earning more and feeling better is not as straightforward as it once was. So if you've been thinking that the next raise will finally fix everything, it might not. Not because income doesn't matter, but because income alone isn't enough. And once you understand that, you can start focusing on what actually creates financial stability. Not just more money, but better control over the money you already have.